What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Izuku died and became master of Fate Grand Order. Stripping away the last breath of peace, the hero, wrapped in blood and dust, must rise again to fight once more, for after all, isn't that what a hero is meant to do? Welcome, brave one. Chaldea greets you with open arms. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations and support the amazing author El Consejo for writing this story. Now, let's get into the story. Confused, bewildered, lost. His mind shattered trying to soothe the pain that consumed him, his stomach churned as his insides screamed for him to stop. The mental weariness only drove him to keep walking, searching for a place that felt familiar. Where were those destroyed buildings? Where were the grey clouds? Where were the flames that surrounded him? Where was he? A phantom pain pressed against his chest, an illusion that slowly faded away. His feet dragged through the snow, leaving trails in an uncertain direction. The damp cold coursed over his skin, the freezing snow enveloped him. His vision deteriorated, and the fog made him feel trapped in a maze with no exit. He grunted with every step, thinking this could be the path to another life. Could it be? Was that light he saw before the light at the end of the tunnel? The ironic thought that perhaps he was heading to hell crossed his mind. Curious, for someone not so religious, to think that it existed after all. He kept walking, as if it were automatic. Why continue when the battle was already over? When he had fulfilled his mission, when he had already defeated it. It was time to leave. Or not. Perhaps, before departing, he wanted an answer, an overview of things. Something to confirm that what he did was worth it. A light filtered through the clouds, offering him a new perspective on what lay ahead. The young man with green hair blinked with difficulty. Where am I? He whispered, feeling the pain in his body preventing him from moving forward. He fell to his knees, sinking into the snow, as his eyes slowly closed and his mind descended into darkness. He didn't know where he was, nor if it had been worth it in the end. His death. The crunch of footsteps in the snow blended with the sound of static, accompanied by the murmur of radios and small metallic jingles. Well, what do we have here? The human figure crouched beside the unconscious one and communicated something over his radio. Harem, you were right. The radar wasn't wrong. There was someone out here. Chaldea. The Organization for the Preservation of Human Order, known as Finis Chaldea, is a secret agency created with the purpose of preventing the imminent extinction of humanity. This observation laboratory recruits the most talented scientists and sorcerers to study the magical and scientific aspects of the world. Its primary objective is to preserve the reign of human order above all else. Although it presents itself as a research entity, its internal structure resembles that of a military organization. The mere existence of something like this can be astonishing. However, its purpose, while seemingly beneficial, is more complex than it appears. Under this logic, security should be maximized, but actions in the dark can trigger a horrific disaster. At least, that was what she thought as she slowly awakened amidst the chaos. Red lights flooded her vision, while smoke intensely filled her nostrils. An explosion, and all she could think was, what? When? Why now? So many questions and so few answers. Looking around, she saw the bodies of workers she had once considered colleagues. Now, everything had been swept away in an instant. Wanting to get up to at least try something, she found herself in terrible pain. She turned her head slightly and saw. Whoa. A massive stone crushed half of her body, and she knew the damage must be severe by now. Was she going to die? Normally, such a thought would drive anyone to the brink of madness, but for her. It was disappointing. Disappointing. It wasn't surprising, considering how she was raised. If it could even be called that. Her life had been an experiment, a failed purpose, with strict control over her personal experiences. This resulted in a questionable understanding of what it meant to live. So yes, she felt disappointed. She hadn't managed to fulfill even a part of her life mission, and now she would die like this. Perhaps she would feel bad for the person who was the closest thing she had to a mentor. So she would be there, waiting for the cold death. Just waiting. Crack. Her eyes blinked. Something caught her attention. A huge pile of debris a few meters away began to move. The rocks shifted quickly until, after a few seconds, a figure emerged. The girl's eyes widened in surprise at the figure that had appeared. For a moment, she felt confused and bewildered until her gaze focused on something else. The silhouette of an unconscious woman, held by the person who had arrived first. Director. The young woman called out from beneath the rock. However, her reasoning was not entirely correct. The young woman had caught the boy's attention a moment ago, and now she could observe him better. Damn. The boy laid the woman's body on the ground, whom he now identified as the director of the place. However, the young woman noticed that he had done so gently. In fact, from her new position, she could see that she was breathing. She felt a slight relief. The boy approached her, and in a few steps, they were face to face. Hello. Hello. You're not in a good place. She blinked at the comment, wondering if he was being ironic. It wasn't the first time someone had been with her. I'm sorry. I'll get you out of there. The boy averted his gaze toward the rock. She watched as he moved closer, thinking it would be a futile effort. Her surprise was great when she saw how the rock began to shift with a slight push, and he managed to lift it. His expression turned serious, and she assumed why. Damn it. He muttered. Is it that bad? She asked, aware of the obviousness. He sighed, clearly. I'm sorry. If I had seen you, I would have. Why are you apologizing? She interrupted him, confused. The green-haired boy sighed without looking at her. I could have saved you. For the first time, she showed surprise. Do you blame yourself for not saving me? Not just you. Maybe if I had anticipated things. If you didn't know, how could you have anticipated it? Silence reigned between them until the girl decided to break it. My name is Mash. The boy looked at her for a few seconds and replied. Izuku. Could you do me a favor, Izuku? He nodded as he approached. I've never liked solitude. Could you stay with me while I pass? Izuku nodded and sat beside her, not noticing a computer screen displaying a countdown. Initiating race shift protocol. In 15. I'm glad you saved the director. Mash said. I found her before the explosion. Izuku replied. You reacted quickly, didn't you? Mash commented. Something like that. He murmured. No one expected this. Tell me about it. He laughed bitterly. Race shift in 8. Could you take my hand? She asked, recalling stories where a person asked a loved one to hold their hand in their last moments. He nodded, as if he were familiar with such situations. She noticed it and saw in his gaze something that seemed to say. Again. It was the first time she saw such an expression. Race shift in 4. You know, we don't know each other, but if I could ask for something, it would be to have fulfilled my purpose. And I wish I could have done something to make that happen. Izuku replied with a smile. Perhaps because of the melancholy of the moment, he didn't notice that reddish marks glowed on his right hand. Race shift initiated. 100% charged. Good luck, masters. Wow. What a dazzling smile. Izuku Midoriya thought that as he looked at the smile Mash gave him as a farewell. Perhaps due to fatigue and the wounds from the explosion, he mistook that smile for the blue glow that surrounded him. And a tunnel he swore he had seen before welcomed him back. He remembered that day when everyone lost. The monumental school in the sky had fallen. The death of the man who was like a father to him. The loss of the person he could have called friend again. Everything went wrong. As if fate mocked them, the demon appeared before him. Still, with a tight heart, he prepared to fight against both. Ironically, Shigaraki resisted this. It was a battle of all against all. At first, he thought that was lucky. However, All for One managed to subdue Shigaraki, and he could hear the heartbreaking screams of the white-haired man. He understood that All for One was forcing his own consciousness to regain control of Shigaraki's body. He tried to stop him. But an explosion from All for One's residual body, an amorphous mass of chaos, greeted him with a smile. Today I win. Hero. Rage overflowed from his being, a heartbreaking scream resonated in the air as the light of the explosion flooded his eyes. For the first time in his life, his words became a death threat, an echo of desperation and rage. I'll kill you. I swear I'll kill you. All for One. I'll end you. The start of his passion play to stop the Demon King was imminent. The ideals he once held firmly now twisted under the weight of the vengeance accumulating in his soul. Senpai. Senpai. A dull sound. Come on, Senpai. Was he failing to call him? Fu. Master. Wake up or I'll kill you. The violent shout turned out to be surprisingly effective. Suddenly, the young man woke up with a start, catching the creature that was licking his face with his hands. No Fu, exclaimed a worried female voice. At first, the green-haired young man had a wild look, but he reacted to the shout and saw what appeared to be a hairball. Caillou. Fu. The creature squirmed desperately in his hands. Quickly, the young man let it go. Was that a rat? The creature ran towards the girl and climbed onto her shoulder. The young man blinked, surprised, and then frowned. I'm sorry. I thought that. Wait, aren't you? He quickly got up from the ground, but the movement made him dizzy, forcing him to lean on his knees. Hello. Yes, it's me. Mash. Mash Kirilight, ready to serve you, senpai. I mean, master. The green-haired boy blinked a couple of times, feeling completely disoriented. Honestly, he had been confused even before waking up, and now that confusion only added to a sea of questions. Why am I wearing different clothes? Where did that shield come from? How did she recover? Where the hell are we now? I have questions, admitted Izuku as he ran a hand through his hair. I understand, master. I will do my best to answer you. Within my capabilities. Huh. Why do you call me master? Asked Izuku, now even more confused. Great, another doubt. Well, it's because I am at your service. I'm your servant. Oh, right, that seemed to clarify things. Wait a minute. That clarified nothing. My what? Huh? Did I not introduce myself properly? If you want, I can do it again. No. Ugh, look, just explain to me why you're my servant. Is that okay? Mash seemed surprised. Master, you and I made a contract, remember? Contract? When? I haven't signed anything. No. I'm talking about a contract between servant and master, a magical contract. Magical? Are you okay? Maybe the explosion disoriented you a bit, said Izuku, worried. No. Master. The seals on your hand. They symbolize our contract. Mash pointed to Izuku's hand. He turned his hand and, indeed, his eyes widened as he discovered a red tattoo on his skin. Well. Great. Now his head was starting to hurt. Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Alright. I'll be honest, I don't understand much of what you're saying, but I'll leave the topic for now. Do you know where we are? Izuku asked. Mash frowned, surprised that her master had no idea what was happening. In fact, now that she thought about it, she hadn't seen him in Chaldea before. But she decided to obey. After all, he was still her master. As far as I can deduce, we are in Singularity F. It had already been detected. But I thought the mission to come had been cancelled due to the explosion, said Mash. Izuku tried to hide it. Singularity F. Mission. As mentioned before, he had been confused from the beginning. This was because he didn't even know what Chaldea was, although he had heard its name from certain people who had imprisoned him. After fainting in the snow, he had woken up in a room where he had been chained, and some soldiers were aiming guns at him. Had he ended up in the wrong place? He decided to set that aside too. I understand, so what's the objective now? Izuku asked. We must find the epicenter of the problem causing the singularity and fix it, explained Mash. At least something was clear. So, I guess we'll have to investigate what caused the destruction of the city, right? Izuku asked, feeling familiar with the desolate landscape. Yes. That's right, master. Responded Mash, ready to move forward. Wait. First of all. Call me Izuku, okay? This master thing is very weird, said Izuku with a grimace. Mash tilted her head. But, if I'm your servant. Ugh, that sounds weird too. We're partners, okay? I understand. But I feel that calling you by your name is something foolish. Would it be better? Senpai. Mash offered a smile, hoping Izuku would accept. At this point, the green-haired boy decided not to argue anymore. Fine, call me senpai if you feel more comfortable. The girl smiled and they began to walk into the unknown. Doubt assailed him as he tried to adapt to an unfamiliar environment, something that was not unusual for him. However, this place seemed abandoned by God, and what troubled him most was not knowing the cause of such desolation, more than the consequences themselves. The air was thick and fatal, as if everything was wrong. That fire in the distance was disconcerting. The way to describe this scene was curious. A strange singularity and beside it, an equally singular girl. She had miraculously recovered after being struck by a rock that fell from the sky, destroying half of her body. Now she was as good as new. Her outfit was also peculiar, although he had seen such suits before, and the shield. Well, everyone had their tools. A constant itch ran through his body, a slight tingling that reminded him of the first times he activated his quirk, but he wasn't doing it now. And those tattoos on his hand. A contract. She called it. Servant and master. Wow, that sounded out of context, and the fact that she awaited orders too. He felt like an intruder in this world, and he didn't know if he should say anything. He preferred to remain silent to gain more context. So much destruction. Mash whispered. Izuku noticed that she wanted to speak, probably to break the uncomfortable silence. Had you never seen scenes like this? He asked as they continued walking. Only in history books that Dr. Ramani brought me. Wars and black and white photos. She replied, and he blinked in surprise. Didn't the chaos of all for one reach here? Izuku thought. Usually, a person seems more affected by these scenes. You don't look like that, senpai. The young woman commented. Well, it's a desolate landscape. But if there's something that caused it and I can prevent it from happening elsewhere, that gives me a purpose. Izuku explained. Are you not scared or nervous? She asked. He stopped, searching for the right way to respond. Saying I'm used to it now would be strange, and saying no didn't feel right either. But he didn't have to respond, as a sharp sensation coursed through his head. The danger sensor activated. He saw a red glow in the sky, like a shooting star, but he knew it wasn't what it seemed. Without hesitation, he hugged Mash and jumped with such force that the ground cracked, moving away just in time before a rain of projectiles struck where they had been. Chain explosions, with an evident murderous intent. In the distance, a figure hidden in the shadows observed with keen skill. A small "oh" escaped her lips upon seeing that her target had avoided the attack. She prepared another projectile, a sword that seemed to materialize out of thin air, ready to be launched like an arrow. The danger sensor activated again, and another red light appeared in the sky. "Here it comes," he said, but Mash interrupted him. She took the lead, placing her shield in front of both of them. The rain of projectiles came with the same force, but Mash resisted it firmly. Izuku looked at her in surprise, wondering about her sudden strength, given that just a moment ago a rock had fallen on her. I guess she was caught off guard, he thought. The attack ceased, and the attacker, frustrated, prepared for another round. However, they were interrupted when someone hit and launched a counterattack, causing an explosion at their position. Izuku frowned upon seeing the direction of the explosion. A long-range attacker. He growled, aware of how annoying they could be. "That was incredible, senpai," Mash exclaimed. You reacted so quickly," she commented. Izuku shrugged. The attack had seemed very obvious to him. Before they could continue conversing, a female scream was heard in the distance. They looked at each other and ran towards the sound. A young woman with white hair was running down a deteriorated road, chased by armed skeletons. The scene was surreal. In her desperation, she stumbled and fell to the ground. Olga Maria Nemisphere was her name, and she was not going to let herself fall there. A halo of yellow energy formed at her fingertips, from which a dark red energy bullet was fired with precision, managing to defeat a skeleton. Well, at least she tried, right? The rest of the skeletons began to laugh at her, or at least it was how it seemed, as the sound of the bones clashing in their jaws simulated laughter. Without wasting time, the skeletons advanced. Desperation engulfed her as she continued firing projectiles, destroying more and more of those creatures, although it seemed ineffective, especially as they got too close. Suddenly, a sound alerted her. Above her, on a light post, a skeleton was watching her. It jumped down from the heights to attack her. Olga tried to react by firing another projectile, but the skeleton, with surprising agility, dodged it while preparing its sword. Horrified, Olga thought this would be her end and could only cover herself with her hands. "Save me, Lev," she screamed, bracing for pain. At that moment, a gust of wind accompanied by the sound of breaking bones made her open her eyes. The skull of the skeleton had been pulverized before her by a kick. A young man with green hair appeared. Sliding to the side, he watched as the rest of the bones disintegrated. Was that a skeleton? The young man murmured, bewildered. The sound of more bones crunching against cold steel diverted Olga's attention. Mash moved with agility, destroying skeletons while dodging the attacks of the adversaries, quickly finishing them off. "Enemies eliminated, senpai," the girl announced. The young man nodded and then turned to the woman. They stared at each other for a few seconds. "Director, are you alright? Director? You. Mash watched as the white-haired woman abruptly approached her senpai, who seemed exhausted. "We meet again. I suppose," the young man said, watching the woman approach him. "Damn intruder," Olga Marie shouted, filled with rage. Light. It was a way to describe how he felt upon waking up after that last glance around. The cold, hard floor welcomed him to an unknown situation. Deja vu, he thought, although that didn't mean it was okay. He kept his eyes closed for a few more seconds, listening intently to everything around him. Capturing as much information as possible was crucial. The room was spacious. The echoes of conversations and whispers could be clearly distinguished. Discreetly, he tensed his wrist slightly, feeling the metal against his skin. He was handcuffed. Don't try to pretend, I know you're awake." A small sigh escaped the green-haired girl's lips upon being discovered. Without further ado, he opened his eyelids. A terrifying face, or at least a failed attempt at being one, crossed Izuku's mind for a moment. A pair of dark yellow eyes, almost golden, seemed to pierce through his skull, as if seeking to unravel his deepest thoughts. The woman's hands, planted on her hips, attempted to establish a dominance that was frankly unconvincing. However, he preferred that to the alternative of being dead. "Well?" she asked, her shoe tapping insistently on the floor, a rhythm that only heightened the tension in the room. Izuku, for his part, limited himself to observing his surroundings. He saw several soldiers in white uniforms, armed with high-caliber weapons, a strange symbol on the left side of their chests, ready to act at a moment's notice. His mind began to plot possible escape routes. "I'm talking to you," the young woman insisted, her voice laced with frustration. His attention returned to her, caught between confusion and fear. "Where am I?" was all he managed to articulate. "Oh? You don't know? Wow, you're quite cynical," she replied, her tone mixing disbelief and mockery. Izuku didn't understand in what way he was being cynical. He just wanted answers. Ugh. Tell me. Who sent you? Any family? The church? The clock tower? The mention of the clock tower added a hint of fear. Despite his silence, Izuku felt completely lost. No. The clock tower would have sent a letter, and besides, you're dirty. The girl murmured, as if the revelation were a reality check. Yes, he was dirty, but that was a consequence of the previous fight before being transported to this place. That reflection pulled him out of his momentary state of understanding. He looked at his chest, noticing he was completely intact, and a disturbing feeling began to nest in his mind. It was as if his health and current state were anomalous, as if something didn't fit. Ugh. This is too much. You're not going to ruin anything. Do you hear me? Whoever you are, I'll investigate later, and you'll be punished for trying to meddle in my life. The young woman kept her back straight, her determination overflowing in every word. Her attempt to impose herself was undoubtedly quite ineffective, but deep down, Izuku could feel there was more to her than met the eye. As the two maintained an intense stare down, a sudden coughing fit interrupted the tense atmosphere. MMPH. The young woman diverted her attention to the newcomer. A well-dressed, almost retro-looking man entered the room. His formal and confident demeanor filled the space immediately. Lev. The woman exclaimed, recognizing him instantly, her voice softening. I'm sorry, Marie. I was informed that there was an unwanted guest. The man replied, his tone indicating professionalism. MPH. Definitely. We found him outside, in the snow, unconscious. Apparently, he underestimated the cold of Antarctica. Her mocking tone was unmistakable. However, what left Izuku frozen was the woman's revelation. Did she just say Antarctica? His throat went dry as his gaze drifted into nothingness. No. How was that possible? How had he traveled from Japan to Antarctica? That light. That blue tunnel. It must have been that. I don't think he's someone from the clock tower. We haven't committed any offense. Lev murmured, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Maybe not directly, but it could be some family. Perhaps they wanted to know about Shiba, my father's research. Olga displayed her nervousness again. Either way, the important thing is that you've captured him, but for now, we can't do much. The mission is about to begin. Lev said in a low, almost conspiratorial tone. Olga seemed to quickly grasp that they could not delay the matter any longer. Keep an eye on him. Don't hesitate to hurt him if necessary. The woman shot one last glance at the green-haired boy before leaving with the man. Izuku, for his part, lowered his gaze, trying to find some explanation for all this madness. Minutes passed, and he could still feel the guard's eyes on him. Anxiety consumed him, trapped in a place as strange as Antarctica, in the midst of a building that defied all logic. Despite being verbally assaulted, Izuku didn't feel real danger from the young woman. She didn't seem like a bad person, but he couldn't trust a hasty judgment. After a few moments of reflection, he decided to move. Hey. What are you doing? Sit down. One of the guards approached quickly while the other aimed his weapon. Izuku remained standing, disobeying. I told you to sit down. The guard, ready to hit him with the butt of his gun, didn't expect the next move. Izuku executed a swift spinning kick, impacting the adversary's face. The other guard prepared to shoot, but a dark energy grabbed his foot, pulling him to the ground. You. The first guard tried to regain control, but a knee to the face slammed him against the wall, leaving him unconscious. Izuku broke his handcuffs and headed for the man trying to communicate via radio. A quick strike to the neck interrupted the communication. I'm sorry. Izuku apologized with a grimace before leaving the room. Running through the hallways, he sought the source of the problem. Desperation grew within him until a buzzing in his mind alerted him. His danger sensor had been activated. He stopped, searching for the source of the danger, but upon finding himself alone, he frowned. Where? He asked into the air, just before feeling a sharp pain in his head. Fire. Debris. An explosion. Izuku's eyes opened disoriented, surprised. What was that? He wondered, feeling the persistent buzzing as he searched for its origin. Guided by the increasing intensity, he arrived at an elevator. Silently, Izuku analyzed his body, noticing that although his clothes were almost destroyed, his body was in perfect condition. He still bore his scars, but the previous wounds were healed. Did someone use a quirk? No. Neither of us had the energy to use our quirks. Where have I ended up? He slapped his cheeks, putting the questions aside as he prepared to face the impending danger. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened. At full speed, Izuku ran as his danger sensor went haywire. There was no doubt, it was here. It was as if there was a bomb about to detonate. Who is he? One of the technicians asked while looking at his computer. A prospect. I thought they were all. Hey. What's he doing? Everyone watched the stranger run toward the ray shift capsules. Stop him. Izuku shouted. Olga's eyes widened at the sound of his voice. What the hell are you doing here? Olga, furious, approached Izuku. How did you escape your confinement? Answer. What did you do to the guards? Izuku was alarmed to see the woman pointing at him, a dangerous glow emanating from her finger. Listen to me. This place is going to explode. What did you just say? What nonsense are you talking about? Surprise flooded Olga upon hearing such a claim. That's not nonsense. You're in a big. Izuku groaned as the danger sensor intensified. There was no time left. Olga wanted to retort, but her eyes widened as Izuku tackled her, enveloping them in a dome of dark energy. A second later. Hell broke loose. Intruder. Mash Kirilight watched the director of Chaldea with a mix of confusion and fear. Fury shone in Olga's eyes, and her body reflected palpable tension. The revelation that the young man with whom she had established a contract was, in fact, an intruder captured by Chaldea left her unsettled. You organized everything, didn't you? You're responsible for this disaster. You wanted to steal Mash. Olga exclaimed, while the young man with green hair looked increasingly desperate, unable to defend himself. However, he remained calm. Izuku was not naive. He could not blame the woman in front of him, who had suddenly appeared warning about a bomb that threatened to blow up the facility. Anyone would be suspicious in such a situation. Are you done? Izuku asked, watching as the pale woman began to catch her breath after her shouting. Ugh. Good. To clarify, I didn't cause any of this. I didn't plant any bomb, as you caught me while I was unconscious. I have no intention of stealing Mash. That would be wrong. We barely know each other, and I don't understand much of what you're saying. Izuku frowned. To be honest, I'm still struggling to comprehend the whole contract thing. The young man looked at the pink-haired girl with a shy smile. I'm sorry if I didn't mention it before, but I didn't know how to explain it. Izuku lowered his gaze. I also want to understand how I ended up here. You're not the only one looking for answers, but shouting won't solve anything. Olga frowned, feeling tempted to shout again, but the green-haired boy's words made her reflect. An awkward silence filled the air for a few seconds. Why were you in Chaldea? Olga asked now, more focused, though still with a tone of anger. Well, to start, I wasn't in Chaldea. I was lost in a snowstorm, not knowing where to go. The last thing I saw was your facility, and then I suddenly passed out. When I woke up, I was already inside. Izuku replied. Wait. You don't know anything about Chaldea, senpai? Mash asked, surprised. The green-haired boy nodded, causing Mash's eyes to widen as she quickly understood why he seemed so out of place. Are you saying we captured a mere vagabond? Olga exclaimed. Well. Yeah, I guess. Izuku replied. Olga pinched the bridge of her nose, cursing a doctor who had detected heat readings outside. Wait. Even if that's the case, what were you doing in Antarctica? And those clothes? Olga said, pointing at his outfit. Good question. Izuku quickly thought about what to say, but the option of confessing that he was No, he couldn't reveal even that. It must have been an accident. I think I saw a bright light, like a swirling blue light, before I got here. He said, looking around. Oh, and before this, where were you? Olga interrogated. In Japan, more specifically in Tokyo. Izuku replied. What? That's not possible. Japan is on the other side of the world. That's why I'm telling you I don't know what happened. I was doing something important. He said, with a pained expression on his face as he placed a hand on his chest. Olga fell silent, filled with doubts. Someone who had been in Japan suddenly appearing in Antarctica was hard to believe, but the light caught her attention. A mistake in the ray shift. She remembered the tests had been conducted hours earlier to ensure everything was working correctly. Wait, and how did you know about the bomb? Olga asked. Well, my quirk allows me to sense danger, so that made me realize something was wrong. Izuku replied, feeling that he had no choice but to be honest. Confusion took over Mash and Olga's faces. You're what? The director asked. My quirk. Izuku repeated. What is a quirk? Mash inquired, visibly confused. The green-haired boy blinked. You don't know what a quirk is? Izuku asked, surprised. I had heard that the Japanese magical system is different from that of the clock tower. Olga said, frowning. Magical system? Izuku asked, feeling out of place. So, your spell? I mean, does your quirk allow you to sense danger? That's really useful, senpai. Mash exclaimed, excited. Yeah, I guess. Izuku replied, feeling like he was losing ground in the conversation. Then, a voice echoed in his mind. Ninth. Resonated the voice of that inherited gift. First. Don't say anything. Go with the flow. Said Yoichi, the first bearer, seriously. But, do you know what they're talking about? Izuku looked surprised. It's complicated, but I'll explain later. Feeling uncomfortable, Izuku decided to take the advice. Well, honestly, I don't trust you. But the circumstances force us to cooperate. Olga declared determinedly, clenching her hands. Don't think you've gotten rid of me. The moment you make a wrong move, I won't hesitate to stop you. Yeah, sure. Izuku replied, feeling the pressure. Olga looked at Mash. Listen, I know you're his servant, but your loyalty is with Chaldea, right? Olga said, feeling uneasy. After all, Mash had suffered a lot due to her father's experiments, and Olga feared the day the young woman decided to take revenge. Senpai, you're on our side, right? Mash asked the green-haired boy. Well, before I answer that question. Huh? The two women looked closely. I really don't know what Chaldea is. Izuku confessed, leaving both of them frozen. Really? You don't know anything? Olga growled, feeling a headache coming on. It made no sense to stay in the same place, exposing themselves to a greater threat. However, along the way, Mash set out to explain to Izuku what Chaldea was. Well. In simple terms, Chaldea is an observatory dedicated to ensuring the survival of humanity, an organization to preserve common sense. Mash said. Huh? Really? Izuku asked, surprised. Yes. That's a very condensed way of describing it, although our duties go beyond that. Olga clarified. I hope you understand why you were attacked. I had never heard of that. That's because Chaldea is a secret organization, senpai. Mash explained. We operate in the shadows to avoid external interference. Some exceptions, like the UN, know of our existence. Olga added, while observing a spot beneath a bridge, noticing a lee line that made her smile. The UN? Izuku murmured. It can't be. The UN dissolved decades ago when quirks began to appear en masse. A conflict over how to handle them led to the dissolution of the treaty. Since Chaldea is dedicated to ensuring humanity's survival, it gathers the best magus and scientists, culminating in Chaldea itself. A model of the planet Soul, or rather, a replica of it. Izuku fell silent, trying to process the information. Magus. The soul of the planet. All those concepts were foreign to him, but he decided to set aside his doubts, not wanting to alarm Mash. Considering that the planet has a soul, using Chaldea's model, we can observe the civilizations of Earth shining on it, symbolizing prosperity, and, therefore, that humanity still has at least 100 years left to live. Incredible. But, in an instant, Chaldea's lights began to go out, symbolizing the eradication of humanity. After exhaustive research and calculations, it was discovered that humanity's extinction was scheduled for December 2016. Now you understand the magnitude of the problem, right? Olga said as she cast a spell confirming the location. This is not a game. The fate of humanity is in our hands. Mash nodded, gripping her shield tightly. The silence hung in the air while the green-haired boy reflected. Not only did the terrible information Mash had revealed leave him stunned, but certain details plunged him into even greater confusion. The provided date was the most unsettling. December 2016. Why did that date affect Izuku so much? Because, first of all, that date should not be possible. This can't be. It can't be. If what Mash is saying is true, then I shouldn't exist. Mash placed her shield on the ground as Olga indicated that they would try to communicate with Chaldea. We are in a singularity detected in the year 2004 AD in a small city in Japan, Fyuki, on land that shouldn't exist until 2016. Where are we now? Izuku asked. Exactly. If we manage to resolve this, everything will return to normal. Olga said. And we'll avoid extinction. It sounds easier said than done, as you can see. By talking like that, you're implying that you can time travel. Izuku commented. That's called ray shift. Mash explained. It involves sending a human to the past, turning them into spiritual particles, and thus doing what is required. Izuku looked at his hand. It works well. He said, forcing a nervous smile. Suddenly, a small beep interrupted the moment, coming from Olga, who displayed a metallic bracelet. About time. She exclaimed as a holographic image appeared before them. A man with salmon-colored hair greeted them. Finally, we managed to contact you. Can you hear me? Do you hear me? He asked. Ramani. Olga replied. What the hell are you doing in charge? Put Lev on. Huh? Director. You're here too. Ramani said, surprised. Ugh. That doesn't matter. I need Lev to know the situation. Olga replied. I'm sorry, Director. Lev seems to have been very close to the explosion and probably. She didn't need more information to understand what Ramani was trying to convey. The young woman hunched over, clenching her fists, overwhelmed by helplessness in the situation. Frustration and other negative feelings crossed her mind, but perhaps the sense of duty was stronger. However, she quickly lifted her gaze. Tell me, Ramani, what happened to the rest of the masters? Olga asked. They are unconscious in their capsules. Good. Start the cryogenization protocol. We don't want anyone to die. Olga ordered. Yes. Right, I forgot we had that. Romani replied. Wait, before that, I need you to check how Mash is doing. The young woman stepped forward. What? Mash, I see that you were also transported here. What is that outfit, young lady? Romani said, suddenly changing her attitude. Doctor. I'm sure I raised you for a better education. Do you have that kind of fetish? No. Ugh. Check my readings better. That way you'll know. Certainly, the tension between them dissipated in a curious way. The green-haired boy remained expectant, reflecting on all this. But the most unsettling thing was, why shouldn't he exist? If what they say is true and mention December 2016 as a possible future, then what does my existence in this place mean? Because, no matter how crazy it sounds, Izuku Midoriya's birth date was July 15, 2266. We lost 80% of the functions in Chaldea. Once we can communicate with the outside, we'll resupply to reorganize again, said Dr. Romani with the seriousness of the situation. By the way, Director. Are you the one who made the contract with Mash? Ugh. No, I think you already know I don't have the aptitude to be a master, Romani. Come on, what are you waiting for? Show yourself. On the computer screen, a young green-haired man appeared, surprising Romani. Director. Yes. That's right. Your little guest. Said the white-haired woman with a frown. Romani gulped. Wait. He's not my guest. Romani defended himself. You're the one who detected his heat signature outside Chaldea. Said Olga. And insisted on bringing him in. Romani just closed his eyes at the scolding. Director, I only suggested he might be some kind of spy. Said the man. Ugh. Well, thanks to that he's the master of our demi-servant. Olga said. The green-haired young man, somewhat uncomfortable, waved and Romani just sighed. Well. My name is Romani Archiman and I'm an employee and doctor at the facility you know as Chaldea. Said the man. You've certainly gotten yourself into serious trouble. The green-haired young man scratched his cheek. Yes, Miss Olga. Ugh. Director Olga. Has clarified the situation enough for me. To be honest, I'm also confused about several things. Confused? Romani asked. Apparently, Romani, he wasn't a spy, just a simple explorer who was dragged here. Tell me something, Romani, is it possible that some ray shift test could bring just anyone from somewhere else? The young woman asked. Romani hummed silently, thinking for a few seconds. Well, there were some minor issues in the tests. But they were corrected without problem. Although if that were the case, it might have been very random. Said the man. Olga growled while looking at the green-haired man. Well, we'll discuss that later. Olga said. I need you to analyze the situation with Izuku and Mash. Well, let's see. It seems Mash receives mana quite optimally from Izuku. But, the situation with Izuku is unknown. He doesn't have anything that could inform me about his state, neither the uniform nor a mystic code. Said the man. Until they return, I won't be able to make an evaluation. Izuku hummed silently. By the way, how do you feel? Your magic circuits must feel sore, right? Dr. Romani asked. The young man had a thoughtful look and finally gave in to his doubts, but curiously the young white-haired woman asked with an annoyed voice. Please, tell me you know what magic circuits are. The green-haired young man looked embarrassed. What? You don't even know? Dr. Romani asked. That means you're not a magus. A spellcaster, I'd rather categorize him as. Olga said. Who the hell taught you magecraft to begin with? Olga approached him and took his wrist. Izuku felt a tingling sensation running through him, just to put on a surprised look. Blue marks shone through his skin, though they seemed quite familiar. They're the same as when I activate One for All. It was a curious detail that Izuku never really paid much attention to, honestly. He thought it was something more aesthetic than really having a true purpose. Only that the marks shone a light pink color along with other colorful sparks, normally when he activated said quirk. While having that thought, Olga Marie's face reflected other feelings. Her mouth opened slightly, as did her eyes. What does this mean? The woman thought in shock, feeling the quality and quantity in the young man in front of her. Structural analysis was a spell that, as its name suggested, allowed her to feel the composition of an object. Normally, Magi use it to get a little more information about an object by pouring some mana into it. Also, in these cases, it was used to know the quantity and quality of magic circuits in a person. The more she analyzed the person in front of her, the more she felt like tearing her hair out. Normally magic circuits have ranges, from the most mediocre to those of simply unmatched quality. In the case of the young spellcaster, it was something else. The quality of these was equal to hers. His circuits were rated X rank. But that wasn't the only thing that made her nervous. His circuits had a strange composition. She could describe them as more robust. No. They were as if these could withstand great tension. Perhaps a more appropriate way to compare them would be with high-tension cables inside a power plant. How was it possible? What family did this guy come from? Her Magus pride was wounded by this guy who didn't even know the basic principles of thaumaturgy. But that wasn't the most surprising. Due to these characteristics, the amount of magical units he could produce or store left her even more astonished. Another thing was the way the magic circuits were distributed throughout his body, reminding her of the root of a tree underground, which made it very difficult to count them properly. But if she was sure of something, it was that he had a great amount. It makes perfect sense that he can maintain MASH without any problem. In fact, Olga dared to say that Izuku could compete in the production of magical units with the vice president of the Clock Tower Association. How terrifying. Another thing she discovered was the speed at which energy traveled through his circuits, its capacity for rotation through them. Something that seemed a contradiction since its form of distribution should make rotation difficult. The simpler the distribution of magic circuits, the faster the mana moved through the body. Even so, the mana was there, as fast as Izuku wanted to do sorcery, his magic circuits would respond in the same way. Everything screamed at her that the magical structure was made for rough use if its user wanted it that way, along with a tuning of speed, ready to never let him down. High-speed spells wouldn't be a problem for him. Olga thought, biting her lip. Without a doubt, Izuku would be someone coveted by the Magus families. Someone who could effortlessly take a mediocre third-category Magus family up hundreds of steps in a single generation. She felt like she had seen enough. What she least wanted was for envy to consume her. But then she felt something else. Her analysis began to deepen, and then she saw it. Flames. An enormous amount of pure, intense power flames waving inside him, surrounding what seemed to be a dark sphere. It can't be. It's not possible. Mash looked surprised at the director when she started to back up with a pale face. "Director?" Mash asked. "Is something wrong?" Romani asked from the transmission. No. That shouldn't be possible." Olga said. "Is something wrong?" Izuku asked. You damn weirdo." Olga said. "Director. What's wrong?" Mash asked, approaching the woman. Magical core." Everyone looked at the woman unable to understand. "Magical core?" Izuku asked. You possess a damn magical core." The woman shrieked, looking at him in horror. What?" Dr. Romani yelled from the projection. "Really?" Izuku said, surprised. "Yes. What is a magical core?" the green-haired young man asked. Izuku certainly felt like a scolded child. In the end, they still had many things to explain to him, and Olga only seemed more stressed. What was his fault? He barely knew the basics, and that left him with a horrible feeling of uncertainty. Olga kept whispering that he was a weirdo, and that damn doctor, the consequences if someone found out he possessed a magical core. When he wanted to know more, they all said they would explain it to him later. In the end, the only thing they explained was what a servant and a master are, and therefore the famous Holy Grail War. Certainly, he began to question what he really knew about the world and how many secrets it kept. Apparently, the servants are spirits, a higher category than ghosts, it seems, because ghosts turn out to exist, that are great legends of the past. Heroes are figures who manage to leave their mark on the history of the country or society. Heroes of legends are legendary warriors who can respond to the call of a magician, becoming a familiar, a kind of servant who can fight or be forced to fight if the master wants it. That's why the mark he has on his hand. Command seals that can be used to force the servant to do things his master wants. Certainly, that part sounded unpleasant. After all, we are talking about human beings with their own thoughts and judgments. Although in Olga's words, the servants are already existences beyond the human, far above a mere ordinary human. Now, once that was clarified, they also explained that Mash is a special case because she is a demi-servant, a human who managed to fuse with one of these heroic spirits, obtaining their abilities. That explains why she suddenly obtained those superhuman abilities. Apparently, she also has some kind of trump card called Noble Phantasm, the crystallization of her legend, the representation of the most incredible act she did in life. Honestly, their way of explaining things was very poetic. He simply called it his strongest move and that's it. But then came the next revelation. He will have to command Mash. He has to let Mash fight for him. Which honestly made him feel uncomfortable. You have to understand that servants fight with servants. Humans like us wouldn't stand a chance, especially you who don't even know the basics. Izuku frowned. Are servants really that powerful? He never sinned of insolence and won't do so now. So he would have to see. Even so, the fact of letting someone fight for him made him feel bad. Once he had more information, they had started to walk. More like run, since apparently one of those servants was detected. Although he still didn't know how strong they were, his goal was always to keep people safe. Therefore, he took care of the director being as cautious as possible. But then, at one point, their path was blocked by a bunch of chains serving as a barrier. The most surprising thing is that they appeared suddenly. The green-haired young man, with some doubt, approached and wanted to touch them, but the danger sensor activated and made him quickly jump. A chain twisted and wanted to wrap around his hand. "Hey. Don't do stupid things," Olga said. The green-haired young man said nothing, slowly understanding how amorphous sorcery could be now that he was beginning to know it. "Are you okay, senpai?" Mash asked, approaching Izuku. He nodded. Too bad." A voice unfamiliar to everyone spoke. Quickly everyone was alarmed, looking everywhere. "I thought I had captured a new prey." At that moment, on a higher step, a figure wrapped in a dark cloak appeared. Izuku frowned, quickly analyzing the new unwanted guest. Light purple hair waved around his body, along with yellow eyes that shone through the dark shadow of his cloak. His gaze reminded him of a snake's, honestly, ready to strike and eat them. "She's a servant. But I don't see her master," Mash commented as she stood in front of the green-haired young man. "So that's a servant," the green-haired young man thought. Perhaps it's because he comes from a more extravagant future, where there were dogmen and gorilla policemen, that he wasn't really very impressed by her intimidating entry. Even so, he felt the dangerous air she exuded. Olga had already prepared an attack spell. The green-haired young man remained thoughtful about whether to really fight. Honestly, showing his metahuman abilities could get them in trouble, considering he had said his lack of knowledge about magic. And even though it was really true, that didn't take away the fact that they knew nothing about quirks. That would make him look not very trustworthy. He was already under the watchful eye of the woman beside him. It was a horrible uneasiness. His role in his time was always to fight to save people. That suddenly changed made him feel uneasy. In a world that's gone mad, it wouldn't be strange if there were servants without masters, Olga declared, giving some reason. The woman began to walk while laughing, approaching what seemed to be the statue of a person made of stone. Certainly, she knew how to make you feel on edge, caressing the face full of terror of stone maliciously. Wait, why were there stone statues of people? People. They probably were before she turned them into stone. Olga growled. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, smart girl. I can do whatever I want with those who enter my hunting field." And maintaining that cold smile, she tore off the head of the stone young man, which, flying off, large gushes of blood gushed out. Izuku's pupils dilated while his fists clenched. A cold fury ran through his body. In the past, he might have acted insolently and launched himself, but now he was no longer that young student. So he stayed in place trying to keep a cool head. All for One had used those tactics, and that had prepared him for people like the one in front of them. If she really can turn people to stone, then I have to find out how she does it. Launching myself like that could be a sure sentence if I don't know how her power works. Oh, calm down. Only one disappeared, but 3 more will enter, the woman said as she licked the blood that splashed her face. Did she eat them for fun? Or was there something more? We'll have to fight, Mash said, maintaining her guard. Izuku didn't object. Honestly, she wasn't going to let them go. Even so, he wanted to stop the girl from going forward. He took her shoulder and thought of some plan. Damn it, that was the problem with fighting alone for a long time. His plans always involved him fighting solo. His teamwork ability had degraded a lot. "Have you fought before?" Izuku asked. "Only in simulations. So you have 0 experience?" the green-haired young man asked. Mash lowered her gaze a bit. Izuku sighed. This was bad. "Keep the shield high and cover yourself as much as you can," Izuku advised. He would have to see what she could do. Mash nodded as she began to slowly advance towards the woman. "Ha! How brave and innocent you are. Is it your first time fighting as a servant?" the woman exclaimed excitedly. Izuku noticed how a weapon appeared in her hand. It was a long weapon with a sickle at the tip. So she uses weapons. Noted. In that case, I'll show you how it's done. Once you declare a fight. It's already started. The woman then disappeared for a second to reappear in front of Mash, giving a quick blow with a weapon's tip, hitting Mash's shield, making the ground and air resonate. Intense brute force, there was no doubt about that. Even so, Mash demonstrated what Dr. Ramani had explained, superhuman resistance, in a position you could call a turtle position, covering herself from the attacks. That's how you do it, giving it your all is what's important. Do you understand, right? My weapon is made to kill immortals. Their wounds never regenerate. It doesn't matter if you can regenerate, said the woman, maintaining the same tone. Izuku remembered that servants apparently had passive regeneration, understanding what the woman meant. Her weapon could negate that ability. One cut and you could bleed out. They were short and successive attacks, each one sparking and emitting purple lightning. A wound. And you'll be a useless servant forever, the woman shouted as she kicked the shield. Mash stepped back a bit, making her head stick out. Without waiting a second, the woman changed the position of her weapon, ready for a wide attack. But Izuku quickly realized. The woman, who had a smile, stopped, seeing a dark blur a millimeter from her eyes. Abruptly stopping, she jumped, taking a step back, but was quickly intercepted by Mash, who tackled her from the front, burying her in the ground. The dust cloud rose for a few seconds, but then the woman emerged in the air, spinning to then land on her chains, blocking the path. Ugh. She growled, full of indignation, feeling a liquid dripping on her cheek. Blood. To be precise, her blood. A cut below her eyelid appeared. The sound of the air being cut by something fast that was heading for her eyes, and she barely avoided it. They took advantage of her open position to try to charge her. How outrageous. She had been so entertained with the young woman that she had overlooked the other two. Cheaters. You're irritating. The woman growled as she let her hair loose. It grew, forming more chains from it, quickly surrounding them. Damn. Olga growled. The green-haired young man remained observing around. The only clear path was the sky, so he had a way out if it was necessary. She is superior to me. Go, senpai. Mash said. The green-haired young man frowned. Was she crazy if she thought he would do that? In a moment, more chains sprouted from the woman's hair. It was more than obvious that she would prevent that. Olga was scared, seeing how she wouldn't be able to dodge one. But then the metallic sound was heard. The attacker's woman's eyes widened, as did the other two. Other chains had made their appearance, these of a darker color with a slight green shine. More and more of these emerged from the ground, clashing with those coming from the woman's hair. Ugh. I see you have more tricks up your sleeve. The servant said, full of annoyance. From the green-haired young man's foot, a kind of dark energy flowed into the ground. The black whip's quirk made its presence. Hahaha. I like that guts. A laugh was suddenly heard, leaving everyone confused. Being a male voice. Despite being a woman, you seem strong, and the master you have there seems quite apt to react. So I can't abandon them. Who is there? The servant woman shouted. You'll know in a moment, dear. The male voice said. In a blue glow, a man with an outfit that seemed like a cosplay from some RPG game made his presence. A wooden staff rested in his hand. Red eyes like blood and blue hair tied in a ponytail. Caster. Damn bastard. Why do you ally with these castaways? The servant woman said. The FF, why? Because it shows that they're better than you. The man shouted. In a movement of strange hands, writings in the air appeared, being launched as high-speed projectiles. Like shooting stars, they exploded against the woman, causing an explosion. Ugh. Olga moaned, covering her face. Izuku looked cautiously at the man who had appeared now in front of them. Calm down, boy. Good instincts, but we're on the same side. She's also my enemy. The man said. The woman fell to the ground on her feet, looking angrily at the new servant in front of her. Who are you? Izuku asked. Servant class caster. The enemy of the enemy is not your friend. But for now, count on me. The man said with a smile full of satisfaction, seeing the servant woman growling. Pain seized his body with overwhelming intensity, as the burning of his wounds felt like scorching flames licking his skin. The weight of exhaustion crushed him, but more than the physical fatigue, it was his spirit that was in a state of deep dejection. Bandages wrapped around his body like a cocoon, and each attempt to stand was like climbing an impossible mountain. We have lost. He whispered in a barely audible voice, his eyes fixed on the wall in front of him, as if seeking answers in its cold surface. His hands, covered in scars, were a silent testament to his failure. He painfully recalled the disaster that had occurred just a few hours earlier. All for One had stormed onto the battlefield, carrying All Might, whose twisted smile was a reflection of his anticipated triumph. In a desperate cry, he had tried to reach him, extending his arm to take his mentor's hand, but they were too far apart. Shigaraki Tamura stood between them, making the mission seem like a lost cause. And then, the words of his mentor, who had given him the opportunity to fulfill his dreams, echoed painfully. I'm sorry. Young Midoriya. A cycle repeating, a tragedy clinging to an inherited power. All for One reveled in his victory, laughing with a voice that grotesquely resonated in the air. Before Midoriya's horrified eyes, the torso of the man who was once the symbol of peace in Japanese society was split in two, in a scene etched in his mind with blood and horror. Izuku Midoriya captured that moment in his memory, an image that would become an indelible scar on his psyche, awakening in him an emotion he never thought he would experience with such intensity. Rage, an absolute and scorching rage that contrasted with his usual nature. Haha. How pathetic, did he really think his simple desire to be a hero would make him win? Shigaraki Tamura mocked, pausing his attack on the ninth bearer of One for All. For Izuku, time seemed to have stopped. How could someone control such fury? How to endure the helplessness in the face of such an atrocious act witnessed before his eyes? Someone he swore to protect. And failed. He had failed to be a hero. Society, from that moment, plunged into overwhelming darkness. The young man watched in silence at the new ally. A servant who, by whim or personal purpose, seemed to have allied with them. He was skeptical, but understood it was better to have an alliance than make him a potential enemy. "Get ready, girl. Your technique is poor, but your courage is great," exclaimed the man, seeking to lift the young woman's spirits. Mash swallowed hard but prepared to follow the instructions of the blue-haired man, raising her shield with determination. Izuku, for his part, prepared to defend. His training had taught him to protect others, and now, the male servant's voice directed at him. "Hey. Boy. You're her master, aren't you?" The question was more of an affirmation, glancing at the red marks on his hand, remembering the role he now had. A master commands his servant to fight, servants fight for the survival of both. Teamwork. Something he hadn't experienced in a long time, and certainly not in this way. "Yes, that's right," admitted Izuku, showing some discomfort but also acceptance. "Then give the orders here. Your judgment in this battle is key to covering the girl's weaknesses at your service." The servant insisted. Izuku nodded, aware that although he had been called a problem child in the past, his ability to learn in unknown situations was undeniable, especially when it came to saving lives. "You're no longer in school, kids. Here, if you can't keep up with the danger, you won't lose a subject. You'll lose a life." Endeavor's words resonated in his mind. Taking a breath, Izuku looked at Mash. "Get ready," he whispered to her. The young woman nodded towards her senpai, fixing her gaze on the enemy. "Idiot, as you wish. You've only hastened your end. But I'll take you alive, caster," muttered the enemy, wielding her scythe with skill. In a blink, lampposts transformed into chains that launched towards the servant caster. With agility, the servant avoided the attack, dancing in the air to dodge with fluidity. In an instant, the woman leaped, her scythe ready for a descending strike. Izuku watched in silence. The woman seemed focused on caster, considering him a greater threat. That played to his advantage. "Mash," Izuku called to the pink-haired girl. She paid attention. "A moment ago you shielded yourself with your shield. Use that and find an opening when the two separate. When I tell you, launch yourself at her. That will give him a chance to attack," Izuku explained. Mash nodded. "Do you trust him?" Olga asked, looking at Izuku. "From what I see, they both consider each other a threat, but he seeks to cooperate to defeat her. That means he needs us in some way, and probably we need him too," Izuku responded. "By the way, you mentioned servant classes and said that, depending on the class, each has assigned abilities." "Of course. Each class has its specialties, and I think by the name you can guess what I mean," Olga explained. "Caster. I suppose he's a sorcerer, right?" deduced Izuku. "I guess that's your way of seeing it. Normally, casters don't stand out for their combat abilities, I mean, a servant like a saber or a lancer who specialize in that stand out more, the class highlights those attributes," Olga said. "And what about Mash?" Izuku asked. "Well, she's a special case. We don't know if it's because she's a demi-servant that her class is something extra. We call her Shielder," the white-haired girl replied. "Well, at least they didn't complicate it with a name," thought Izuku, observing the large shield the girl carried. The green-haired boy watched as the man dodged the woman's attacks, understanding the threat of a wound that doesn't close. He also concluded that, indeed, his hand-to-hand attacks would not be very effective or would be quickly countered. "The right moment," thought Izuku. In an instant, the caster placed his hand on the ground to jump back. For Izuku, it was curious to notice how the floor's relief changed. It wasn't very noticeable, but it was the strangest thing. "What's wrong, caster? Don't you have time to chant your spells?" the woman shouted, extending her weapon again. "Mash!" exclaimed the green-haired boy. "Yes," she replied, cracking the ground under her boot and launching herself between the woman and the man. The metallic sound and the wave of air demonstrated the girl's firm stance. "A tank," thought Izuku, comparing these roles to those of typical role-playing games, RPGs, or gachas. "TSK." The woman retreated, avoiding the girl's possible counterattack. Once she stepped on the ground and prepared to guard again, the sound of breaking concrete alerted her. Her ankles were bound in a second by dark chains. "What?" She was alarmed, but now she heard the laughter of the blue-haired man. "That's what I call adapting quickly." Caster, making a quick finger movement, made a symbol glow beneath the woman. "Idiot, runes are not chanted." A storm of fire started, a huge whirlwind devoured the servant. The burning didn't take long to make her scream. Once it dissipated, she could barely lean on her weapon, glaring furiously at everyone. But she wasn't even allowed to speak when several more runes were drawn in the air with a hand movement by the caster. The magical projectiles were fired at a ridiculous speed towards the woman, causing a series of continuous explosions that shook the entire place. Everyone remained silent, waiting for the smoke cloud to dissipate. Kneeling, with blood dripping, the servant only looked down at the ground, perhaps accepting her defeat. Small bright purple particles surrounded her, disappearing from where she once stood, leaving no trace upon her disappearance. Heroic spirits have already died. I guess it makes sense, thought Izuku, trying to dismiss the idea that they had killed someone. Finally one less, sighed the man, laughing. Apparently, he had wished to do this for a while. Thank you very much for helping us, Mash said sincerely, bowing in a bow. But the man, quite unabashedly, embraced her by the shoulders. Oh, don't be so modest, we did it thanks to your help. Mash blinked at the approach. It was the first time something like this happened to her, so she didn't know how to react. But a small tap on the man's hand broke the gesture. Thank you very much, but don't take such liberties, Izuku said, separating Mash from the man. He was a stranger and already looked too old for a young girl like Mash. Great, an old pervert, Olga growled, knowing that Mash didn't have a well-developed common sense. Even Fu hissed towards the male servant. Come on, I'm just grateful. The man laughed. A small beep interrupted the moment and a holographic image appeared. Castor looked curiously at the image of the man in front of him. I see you apparently found a decent heroic spirit, Roman commented, unaware of what had happened moments ago. Is that a magical communication? The man asked, interested. Nice to meet you, I don't know who you are, but Roman was interrupted by the man. Bah, no need to introduce yourself, just get to the point, will you? Can you do that, weakling? Weakling? The doctor exclaimed indignantly. Izuku blinked. Without a doubt, he was quite a special subject who was helping them. You are a surviving servant of the Holy Grail War, or at least the only one who doesn't seem to be on the side of the others, commented Dr. Romani as he noticed how things had calmed down after the defeat of the servant Lancer. From time to time, Izuku glanced around, making sure nothing would catch them by surprise. To be precise, the reality is that I simply didn't lose like the others, replied the male servant, his voice laden with bitterness. Our Grail War suddenly transformed into something else. The city began to burn, and humans disappeared, leaving only the servants. I don't understand how it could happen, he recounted while fiddling with a leg before crushing it disdainfully. Still, in the midst of the confusion, the Grail War was resumed by the saber-class servant. She turned against us, went mad, and in the blink of an eye, defeated Archer, Lancer, Assassin, Berserker, Rider, and once she defeated them, just like Lancer, they became corrupted by a strange black sludge. The man frowned, still perplexed by how everything had occurred. Well, I defeated Assassin before meeting you, and now Lancer is already out of the game. The man continued as he approached the bridge railing. So, there are more servants out there, and we might run into them, Izuku commented. That's right. The man nodded. So we must be prepared for anything. I hope you continue to show that courage. There is no other option. Human history as we know it is at stake, Olga said with absolute seriousness. Izuku looked at the young woman. He had had many interactions with her before, but at no point had he seen her back down or want to flee from the situation. She was determined to move forward. Izuku managed a faint smile. So, once this is all cleared up, it would be good to explain how to end this, the man said. One way to end this would be to eliminate the rest of the servants, although the more serious problem would be Saber herself, who is being fully supported by the Holy Grail. So maybe we should get straight to the point. Destroying the origin of the servants, right? Intervened Olga Marie, understanding. That's right, we should try to destroy the Grail, the man affirmed. That would correct all of this, said Mash. The origin of the singularity, Izuku commented. Although there are many things that seem very different from the Holy Grail War we know, added Mash. It wouldn't be so strange if this were another work related to the same. Olga reflected, recalling that her father had participated in this war, although she didn't remember which servant was summoned. Izuku and Mash, I will say this only once, so pay attention. Chaldea observes the future from a model of the earth called Chaldeas. Likewise, a familiar named Lapis collects past records, that is, the history or histories that were never made public for some reason, buried in the sands of time. Well, Lapis recorded that an unusual Holy Grail war occurred here. Certainly, terms like Holy Grail were quite bewildering for Izuku. Although he was not religious, he understood that the Holy Grail was a highly sought relic belonging to the Messiah of the Christian religion, Jesus Christ. However, it seemed that it could also grant miracles and summon powerful ghosts. Wow. From this system, my father, the previous director, used this data to create the summoning system of Chaldea. This way, we can summon our own heroic spirits. We call it Fate, our third invention after Lapis and Chaldeas. Olga seemed to perk up when mentioning this. Third. I thought Shiba, the lens that observes the near future, was the third, commented Mash. Well, that was a joint effort with Professor Lev. Still, that's the origin of how we can summon the servants, Olga explained. Quite a bit of information. thought Izuku, wishing he had a notebook to jot everything down and not forget anything. He felt that all of this needed to be safeguarded. The group began to move cautiously around them. Izuku reflected on how he had ended up in such a chaotic and completely unfamiliar scenario. He understood that he was in the past, but knowing that such surprising things existed in the darkness or shadows felt like his view of the world was changing. I wonder if the origin of quirks has any relation to this. Izuku recalled the words of the first. He knew there was something more, something extensive, that couldn't be told at that moment. Not interfering in the affairs of the era and only serving as weapons is the golden rule of the servants. The man commented, walking in front of them. Their goal is to investigate and end the singularity, and mine is to end the Grail War. Collaborate. Thought Izuku, understanding the servant's point. The destruction around them was vast, with entire houses and deformed roads. At one point, Izuku extended his hand to Olga to help her climb up a sunken part. Olga remained silent. I know you don't trust me yet. But in the end, I also want to end this and return to where I belong. Said Izuku. Olga sighed. Yes, I understand, yet all of this still feels very strange. Olga took Izuku's hand and was helped up. Hey. Dr. Ramani mentioned something. About being qualified to be a master. Is it some sort of exam or something like that? Izuku asked. Olga stopped and shot Izuku an annoyed look, who blinked in confusion. Then, the woman sighed. The qualifications to be a master have to do with your being, if it can be called that. Forming contracts and seeing if your circuits can adequately provide mana to a servant. But it also involves being able to summon it to begin with. Olga explained. So, you were. No. I am not capable of summoning a servant properly. Olga confessed. Oh? Really? You seem like a top-notch mage. Said the male servant. Is it some kind of curse? Shut up, that's none of your business. The young woman snapped. Finally, they all arrived at a school that would serve as a refuge for them to rest. Izuku had a moment of calm while sitting on the stairs. Could he return to his time? Or was it worth returning? Izuku tried to deny the last question while rubbing his hands and looking at the red seals. Then he noticed his servant looking through the window and didn't wait long before going toward her. Are you okay? Izuku asked. The pink-haired girl blinked, looking at the green-haired boy. Huh? Yes. I'm fine. She replied. Since we started, you haven't stopped fighting. I barely understand a bit of what they explained to me, but if you are just a servant part, that means you can still tire out. Said the young man. No. She tried to deny. It's okay, relax, remember that this is your first time doing this. Izuku comforted her. The young girl said nothing while nodding. So, what's bothering you? Izuku asked. I just can't use my noble phantasm. Mash confessed. Wow, is that the trump card they mentioned? Izuku asked. Mash nodded while tightening her shield. But you've handled it very well just with that weapon. Commented Izuku. No. This shield hasn't shown its true form yet, and since we are dealing with servants, it could be very dangerous. I wouldn't be able to adequately protect you. Mash lamented. Now it was Izuku's turn to feel uneasy. Protecting him. It was even hypocritical to think that he didn't like being protected when he did the same before. Maybe it was that, the obligation to do as much as possible to protect a person, even if it cost you your life. You should also think about yourself, Mash. Izuku advised. Mash stared at him intently. I can't do that, senpai. Since I was created, my mission has always been to be a demi-servant. Izuku looked at her, puzzled. What do you mean you were created? Izuku asked. The girl looked down. I am what they would call a design baby, a tool created and modified from my conception to be a demi-servant. Mash explained. Izuku was stunned by that revelation. That has always been my mission. Mash continued. My purpose of existence. No. Izuku interrupted her, leaving Mash confused. Mash, tell me something, you feel emotions, right? Huh? Yes. Well, I think so, right? I mean, I've felt scared and excited. To say that you are just a tool would be a contradiction. Observed Izuku, looking at the cloudy sky. If what you say is true, then you are not a slave to what people say. Life goes beyond a purpose or a mission. I've seen you choose to do things, and that shows your free will. Mash silently watched the green-haired boy. You are not just a demi-servant or a lab creation. You are a living being and a human being. Izuku affirmed. I'm not going to be my father's tool. The green-haired boy recalled, thinking of an old friend. Heh. It's the first time someone calls me that. Mash spoke, a faint smile appearing on her face. Senpai, you are someone very human and very noble. Izuku looked at her. Maybe you flatter me too much. To me, protecting a life is worth a lot, and that includes yours. Said Izuku, seeing how Mash seemed surprised. If your duty says to protect me, the same goes for me. Not because I'm your master, but because your life itself has value. Why? I have a duty, senpai. But, what about you? Mash asked, bewildered. Helping each other. It's very human, Mash. People focus on their 3-meter radius to protect themselves and protect those they love, their friends and family. That's why. I, not having such a role, must lighten their burden. Said Izuku, feeling something recover within him. I must try to save them. Mash looked at him in surprise, trying to understand those words. But above all, admiring a smile that seemed to shine. Suddenly, the smile disappeared. Izuku's emerald eyes widened and his body quickly turned. There, with a serious and even repulsed expression, a brown-skinned man with white hair was holding a drawn bow with an arrow. In this specific place, I never thought I would hear such stupidity again. The archer class servant had made his appearance. Minutes earlier, on the rooftop of the school, the air was filled with a mixture of concentration and nervousness. Young Olga Murray was immersed in a deep effort to become a valuable piece within the singularity that had defied all her expectations. She was aware that, although she did not possess the mastery that others exhibited, she had to find clever ways to make her presence more significant and useful in this world full of challenges. In a bright golden circle she had carefully created, she had forged a perfect refuge to practice her own magecraft. This space not only provided her the opportunity to train, but also prepared her for any eventuality that might arise in the future. With firm and determined hands, she began to carve small luminous symbols into the stones arranged around her, while uttering a series of words that resonated in the air like an ancient chant. Stars, cosmos, gods, animus, hollow, void, anima, and hemisphere. She murmured, feeling how magical energy accumulated around her. A sigh escaped her lips as she saw that, at last, her spell was beginning to manifest correctly, filling the circle with an almost celestial glow. It was at that moment that the male servant appeared behind her, his imposing presence cutting through Olga's concentration. With a mocking smile on his lips, he remarked. Humph. How diligent you are. This is better than nothing. Olga responded, not letting the man's provocation distract her. However, the calm faded when he, with an air of amusement, took the stones that contained the symbols, provoking the young woman's indignation. Hey. Olga exclaimed, frowning while letting out a resigned sigh. She knew that arguing with the servant would lead nowhere, so she decided to change the subject. I forgot to ask you one thing. She said, trying to get back to the conversation. Tell me. The man replied, in a tone that hinted at curiosity. Do you know who the saber class servant is? You seem to have fought him more than once. Without taking his eyes off the stones, the servant nodded slowly. Anyone who witnesses her noble phantasm would know her identity immediately. That sword that ensures victory. Or maybe the sword stuck in the stone that chooses the king, the most famous sword of your time. Excalibur. Upon hearing the name, Olga's eyes widened in surprise, a knot formed in her stomach. Excalibur? She asked, feeling disbelief take hold of her. It was impossible not to recognize such a name, so loaded with history and legend. The sword of the famous King of Knights, King Arthur. The servant continued, his words resonating with an air of authority. Without thinking twice, Olga quickly got to her feet, her heart racing. Do you want Mash to fight against King Arthur? She can't even use her noble phantasm. She shouted, concern evident in her tone. The girl has her strong shield. The man replied with a sarcastic smile. Someone tried to destroy it with their beloved arrows, but failed in the attempt. If it has anything to do with Saber, that archer will move to protect her. A heavy silence settled between them, as if the very air had stopped circulating. The tension was palpable, and a sense of imminent danger began to envelop them. Suddenly, a deafening explosion resonated in the air, shaking the rooftop and disconcerting Olga. The world around her began to fade into chaos, but in her mind, a determination blossomed. The scene was a devastated landscape, a place that was once a vibrant school, now reduced to a pile of rubble and ruins. Desolation stretched as far as the eye could see, and the air was thick with heavy dust and the pungent smell of destruction. There were no signs of life, except for the grim possibility that bodies might be trapped among the debris. Sadly, that was the reality. He moved with difficulty, each step a battle against the pain that threatened to reopen his wounds. But the physical suffering was insignificant compared to the emotional storm consuming him. A chain of atrocious events had left its mark, and the aftermath was overwhelming. You failed miserably. He reproached himself over and over. You failed to smile with them. With each stone he moved, he repeated to himself that at least he could rescue the bodies. It was the only thing he believed he was good at. The row of graves he was to dig would be long. He paused for a moment, breathing deeply to silence the torment in his mind and the pain coursing through his body. The air, dense and suffocating, enveloped him like a cloak of despair, but he had to carry on. Despite knowing he wasn't the only survivor, that reality barely alleviated the overwhelming guilt that consumed him, leaving him with only a spark of hope. The memories of his companions' laughter, the murmurs in the hallways, and the distant sound of bells announcing the change of class tormented him. Everything had disappeared in an instant, leaving him trapped in a desolate landscape that seemed like an endless nightmare. But giving up wasn't an option. Even when an inner voice whispered that there was nothing to save, he forced himself to continue. Each stone he moved was a painful reminder of those who once shared his life. With each effort, he honored not only their memories, but also the broken dreams and moments that would never materialize. He knew that beyond these ruins, the world kept turning, indifferent to his personal tragedy. The world where, perhaps, someone still remembered what his school had been, though that seemed increasingly unlikely. Finally, after removing a pile of rubble, he found what he was looking for. A small notebook, covered in dust but miraculously intact. He opened it with trembling hands and found the pages filled with notes, drawings, and messages from his friends, a distant echo of a past that seemed irretrievable. With tears he could no longer contain, he carefully stored it in his backpack, aware it was a vestige of what he had lost forever. He stood up slowly, leaning on a fallen beam to avoid falling. He couldn't stay there any longer. He needed to seek help, find others who might have survived, and hopefully begin to rebuild something of what had been destroyed. With a heart heavy with despair, he took one last look at the ruins of what had once been his world. Then, with hesitant but determined steps, he headed toward an uncertain future, leaving behind the sorrow of the past, but carrying the burden of those who had fallen and now lived only in his memory. In the twilight of the soul, heroism shines, like a fleeting shadow in a world that aches. Courage and determination, distant mirages, in grim situations where humans lie. Withered sacrifices, worn-out altruism, in acts that, in the end, are just forgotten echoes. The risk looms, like a bird of ill omen, to protect others, to defend a sincere aspiration. But oh, how fleeting is the gesture of kindness, in the crushing routine, the truth is lost. Heroism, a virtue in a world that breaks, drowns in fear, where good never celebrates. Thus, in small gestures, despair is hidden, the fight is a whisper, a call in flight. And though in many cultures courage is praised, heroism is a yearning lost in agony. In those fleeting moments, time is measured in seconds. From the first pang in his skull, his body tensed, ready to react. In a blink, his gaze scanned the surroundings. And before the second ended, his mind was already planning the move against the imminent attack. Steely eyes, white hair, and brown skin. A long, dark bow, an arrow with a strange shape, the metal twisted into a cold spiral. The sound of Mash's hands gripping the shield echoed, interposing in the arrow's path and shattering the projectile into pieces. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. "Senpai, behind me." The demi-servant, alert, watched the man. Both quickly deduced it was Archer, infiltrating the place where they had sought a moment of peace. Lighten their load. Save them. Did you really just say that? A gleam and a new sword. Izuku stared intently into the man's steely eyes. "I was saying it, but you interrupted me," said the green-haired boy. "Oh, sorry, should I have brought a microphone so it could be heard throughout the place?" Sarcasm flowed as naturally from his mouth as a second language. Mash was about to leap at him, but the green-haired boy grabbed her shoulder. "Archer, aren't you supposed to attack from a farther distance? What kind of ranged attacker bothers to enter?" said Izuku. "MPH. Don't tell me you think you know about strategies," the man retorted. "More than you, it seems. Now caster," shouted the green-haired boy. The man's eyes widened, quickly inspecting where the attack might come from. But there was no one visible. Emerald rays suddenly appeared throughout the hallway. Mash turned her gaze, seeing her master's hand in front of her. A spell. The demi-servant was alarmed. Plus wind pressure. The young man's hand, in a fist, opened his fingers forcefully. Like using the thumb as a stop to accumulate strength and a finger to launch a strike, in this case, he used all 4 fingers. Mash, initially not understanding, soon stood agape as that simple action unleashed an extremely powerful explosive wave of air. The Archer-class servant was taken by surprise by such a broad and unexpected attack. His body, impacted by the air pressure, was thrown against walls and rubble. The expelled wind was so strong that half of the building was destroyed with ease. The place literally shook at the sudden phenomenon. The scream escaped her lips as the floor beneath her fragmented and collapsed, a hurricane rising from below made her defy gravity and fly. "Ah!" Olga screamed as she distanced herself from the floor. But she was quickly caught by the caster-class servant. "Wow. Calm down, woman. Leave the heights to the birds." A mockery escaped his lips. But the sudden fright made the woman set aside the comment. "What's happening?" Olga shouted. The servant shook his head, not knowing the answer. "I sensed a servant's presence, probably Archer," commented the man as he moved through the rain of debris returning to the ground. A few seconds later, the other half of the building ended up falling. A cloud of dust rose, making it impossible to see what was happening. "Izuku and Mash," Olga commented, scared. But the man placed a hand on her shoulder. Relax, those two are fine. Trust the girl more. The servant commented while dispersing the dust with a motion of his staff. There, in the midst of everything, with the shield raised, Mash was covering both of them from any stray debris. Are you okay, senpai? The demi-servant asked. Izuku nodded, looking towards the place where Archer was launched. Huge furrows, fallen trees, and, in general, a landscape deformed by what everyone would swear was a hurricane. That's how the forest in front of the school ended up. God. Are you okay? Mash turned her gaze. Director. Are you unharmed? Mash asked. The woman shook her head while dusting herself off and pointing at Castor. He caught me in time. The woman commented. MPH. Don't you think I deserve a reward? Perhaps a kiss? The man asked, though he only received Olga's look of disgust. He clicked his tongue. Doesn't anyone appreciate Celtic beauty? Without further ado, his gaze shifted to the green-haired youth. Well, kid. What happened? Asked the man. Archer snuck inside the building, we realized when he was already in the same hallway as us. Said the green-haired boy. Approaching. That's not very common of him. Said Castor, furrowing his brow. I suppose he shot one of his explosive arrows. Mash blinked, looking at her senpai. Izuku, looking somewhat uncomfortable, spoke. I did. The distance we were at made it difficult for Mash to close it without him launching an attack. The green-haired boy commented. Why didn't you ask for help? The director growled. MPH. It would have been the same, we were at a greater distance than them. Commented Castor, though then he looked surprised. Wait. Were you the one who caused all this mess? He commented while pointing at the destroyed field. The green-haired boy nodded. Olga looked bewildered. Wait. Then, do you know more spells? No. How could you think of attacking a servant? Don't you realize they have great resistance, Olga said, scolding the green-haired boy. But Castor interrupted her. Well, that spell seems strong enough to drive Archer away. That response left the woman speechless, now seeming to scrutinize Izuku with sharp eyes. Castor looked towards the rest of the forest while spinning his staff. He's waiting for us there. The servant announced. The rest simply prepared for the battle awaiting them. Before we start moving forward. The servant stood in front of them. Girl, from what I understand, you don't know how to use your noble phantasm, is that correct? Mash nodded, remembering the conversation from a while ago. She's new to this. She needs to get used to it to solve the enigma, right? Izuku asked, looking at Castor. Wow, you're quite an understanding master. Although yes, you're right. The concept of a demi-servant could be considered something new, though I'm sure it's guided by a principle similar to pseudo-servants. Said Castor. Pseudo-servants? Izuku asked. It's another related term. I'll explain it to you later. Said Olga, trying not to deviate from the topic. Noble phantasms are more instinctive, so there's no point in overthinking it. The man, after saying that, closed his eyes for a few seconds. Then, following that logic. You should be cornered to show that instinct. Damn, I'm a genius. Olga's eyes widened, understanding where he was going. Hey. Don't you think it's an extreme measure? Olga shouted. Want to fight Mash? Izuku strangely understood the man's point. How could he not, when his learning often relied on the same principle? In fact, from the first time he activated One for All, he was heading towards an act of extreme danger. Oh, many other times. Although Izuku certainly didn't want Mash to have to go through the same situations. After all, in the same way, those things had consequences. His handful of scars backed him up well. Desperate situations require desperate measures. Said Castor, looking at Mash. The girl seemed somewhat nervous, though because the servant had been helping them, she decided to trust him. You two watch. Are you ready, girl? The young girl nodded while stepping forward. Have confidence in yourself, Mash. The green-haired boy encouraged. That seemed to have results. By the way, this time you'll have to leave the girl without instructions. It's something instinctive, and the last thing you want is for your instructions to destroy her concentration. Said the man. The green-haired boy understood, though he certainly had a doubt that had just been implanted in his mind. All this certainly makes me nervous. Said Olga while glancing at the training battle between Mash and Castor. If you're referring to the training, it's understandable. But Mash has shown courage. Said Izuku. She hasn't been a demi-servant for long. Said the director. I'm surprised you're saying that, considering she was one of your creations. The green-haired boy revealed with a certain seriousness in his words. The woman tensed, only confirming what he already knew. Did she tell you? Said Olga. Only a part, though it wasn't hard to deduce the rest. Izuku commented. No. I was against that. I was horrified. The director growled. But you didn't do anything. Izuku countered. I couldn't do anything. It would be going against my father. Do you understand that? Olga growled, feeling judged. The green-haired boy sighed. No, it would be a lie to say that I understand that. But it certainly puzzles me that you resorted to that for an association that cares about human order, said the green-haired boy. Because of these threats, we resorted to that. Not everything is resolved diplomatically, Olga retorted. Izuku said nothing, he knew that. I don't want to start a fight now. But you should feel grateful, not to me, but to Mash. She didn't hold a grudge against anyone. It's incredible. Izuku praised the young girl. Olga opened her mouth only to close it afterward. I don't understand why. Olga whispered. She told me that Dr. Roman is something like her tutor. Maybe he had something to do with it. Though I dare say that maybe. She's very pure. And good. I met many people who, due to certain situations that could be said to be similar, held a grudge against the world. And that caused enormous disasters. Said the green-haired boy. I feel she should hate me. Olga whispered. Are you passing your father's sins onto yourself? The green-haired boy asked. Ugh. Olga Marie looked away. That's kind. Said Izuku. What? She asked, bewildered. You feel empathy. In fact, all this time you've shown courage and commitment. No matter how stressed you are, deep down you show genuine concern. Said the green-haired boy. The woman opened her eyes while coughing. I'm the director. This is my responsibility. Said the woman. Many, even with those positions, would have fallen into deep panic. You gritted your teeth and gave instructions. Olga, believe me, I've met people who have thrown in the towel in situations like this. Said the green-haired boy. We can't take risks. All for 1-1. We have to accept it. The green-haired boy looked towards the forest. You? Ugh, don't think you'll divert my attention from you just by praising me. Said the woman while crossing her arms and looking elsewhere. Despairing won't do anything, telling the truth might be harsh, but can also help us realize our value. Said the green-haired boy. Olga sighed, though her shoulders relaxed a bit. By the way, taking advantage of this moment, something seems strange to me. Is it normal for a master to shout all the time at their servant what to do? Wouldn't that give away the plan to everyone? Commented the green-haired boy. Olga's eyes opened wide, feeling an intense urge to hit herself, but she only refrained to preserve her dignity. Damn it. How did I forget to tell him? The woman shouted internally. The girl was tired while leaning on her shield and looking at the servant caster. Come on, girl. Where did that momentum go? The man growled. I feel this isn't working. Wouldn't he be better? Said the girl. I already told you, it's something instinctive. Commented the man. Ash caught her breath, ready to continue, but then. Stop. Her eyes blinked, looking everywhere. Izuku and she made eye contact. Did you hear that? Just nod. Again, her senpai's voice made its presence known. The girl nodded vigorously. Oh, wow. Looks like they already discovered the mental link. Caster laughed. At least now you won't be shouting like a madman all the time. Certainly, it's something surprising. Said Izuku, approaching. It makes more sense. Well, that's a breakthrough. Though I think it's better to end this here. I'm sure Archer is already desperate. The man had a point. Giving Archer more time would be a problem, though venturing into the forest. Stay close. Said Caster, making everyone nod. The next few meters were quite surprising for everyone. Damn it. What kind of spell did you use? Olga started to feel chills again, seeing all the fallen trees. It's complicated to explain. Izuku commented, looking everywhere. The caster, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look, not really feeling any remnants of mana. As if no spell had really been used. Though he abruptly stopped. To the left, to the left. Both he and Izuku shouted almost simultaneously. Mash stood in front of Izuku, though ironically Caster stood in front of her. The green-haired boy had already drawn Olga behind him. The projectile breaking the air whistled as it approached at dizzying speeds. But it never reached the target when the servant quickly pronounced a spell. The projectile in question disappeared into motes of fire as if it had never existed. Izuku certainly seemed impressed, though he didn't have much time to think as he felt how the danger sensor kept notifying more projectiles. Entire showers of sharp metal created a scene of madness. The caster, with a hand motion, created several runes in the air that were shot at the projectiles, destroying several. But more appeared amidst the smoke cloud. Son of a bitch. Caster punched the ground while tree root served to stop some attacks. But more slipped through, clashing against Mash's shield that covered the three of them. But the green-haired boy felt a sharper pain in his forehead. Everything seemed to pause for a few seconds around him. Oh great dog of the Red Plains. Grunting. A dark sword twisting upon itself. Being shot by Archer from a distance. It then pierced through his chest while blood spurted and was absorbed by the metal, turning it crimson. The green-haired boy's eyes opened, quickly touching his chest, noticing there was nothing. The sound of metal still raining from the sky brought him back to reality. Izuku quickly turned around and, hidden among so much undergrowth, detected the servant. What just happened is the same as in the room. Izuku remembered it happened the same when he arrived with Olga at the time of the explosion. The green-haired boy shook his head, not knowing what was happening with those strange visions. But he knew it had to do with the danger sensor. Here is an enhanced version of the text. Archer's eyes met those of a green-haired boy in an intense contrast of emerald and steel. Impossible, he thought, aware he was too far to be noticed. The rain of simple swords was supposed to serve as a distraction, but in an unexpected twist, the rays began to ascend from the ground to the sky, reversing the roles. Quickly, the man loaded his arrow. A flash crossed the distance in a blink, and finally, the two faced each other. Rays and explosions unleashed in an instant, while the air blast hit their backs. Everyone around turned, only to glimpse the trace of a lightning bolt, followed by the dust cloud lifted. Olga was about to process Izuku's location when, suddenly, an explosion in front of her made her shudder. "Senpai!" exclaimed Mash, bewildered to see the green-haired boy amidst the dust. But when? The woman was alarmed. "Hey! That opponent is mine!" shouted the servant caster indignantly. A few meters away, Archer watched the young master cautiously. The bow disappeared, replaced by a pair of short swords. The sound of rays emanating from the green-haired boy's body filled the air, but only for a moment before, in a flash, he launched himself again at the servant. Archer's eyes sharpened, seeing how Izuku disappeared, and he turned, crossing his swords defensively. Archer's feet sank into the ground when, with a turn, Izuku launched a second spinning kick. The impact dragged him, forcing him to brace himself to avoid being projected against the trees. Vapor emanated from the twin swords as fissures began to show on their surface. "What the hell?" Olga whispered, shocked, taking a step back. Mash shared her astonishment. She had witnessed the spell her master had used moments ago, but this was something entirely different. "Physical reinforcement," Mash commented, incredulous. "That's strong," exclaimed Olga, full of doubts. The caster observed the confrontation with mixed emotions. He wanted to face the enemy servant, but seeing the boy pushed back Archer filled him with admiration. His hand tightened around the staff, caught in internal conflict. Archer growled at the cramp running through his muscles, discarding his swords to wield a new pair, though these were equally worn. "This idiot. What kind of ridiculous strength is this?" he thought, jumping to gain distance and prepare his bow, but the green-haired boy didn't hesitate to pursue him. Taking a powerful leap, he wouldn't allow him to gain the upper hand. Archer threw his two swords at him, spinning at dangerous speeds. First the silver one, then the dark one. Izuku skillfully dodged, passing between both. Without losing his calm, Archer made another pair of swords appear, waiting for the green-haired boy approaching. When Izuku was close enough, he tried a dual slash, but the green-haired boy grabbed his wrists firmly. "Let's stop this. Stop fighting and tell us what you know," the green-haired boy demanded. "Oh, yes, sure. And do you also want a cup of tea?" replied Archer sarcastically, freeing himself from the young master's grip with a precise kick to the stomach. Izuku was projected into the sky, falling into the archer's trap, who had launched his swords like boomerangs. "Senpai!" Mash shouted, running and preparing to jump. However, from the green-haired boy's back, a burst of dark energy emerged. Black Whip deflected both swords with force. "TSK." Archer clicked his tongue, making the swords disappear in the air while returning to the ground. He didn't have time to relax, as a shield struck him, and, subsequently, a kick followed. Before he could counterattack, Izuku fell from the sky, trying to surprise him from above, taking advantage of the opportunity Mash provided. Now both the demi-servant and the young master seemed to have formed a team against him. "Who the hell is this guy?" Adamiya, observing the green-haired boy with increasing concern. There is no glory in war. If there is no compassion. Confusion and anger swirled in his mind. Servants were meant to face each other. It was an unbreakable rule. Ordinary humans should have no chance. But, amidst that chaos, who was he? Olga clenched her fists, her gaze fixed on the fool who seemed to be the only master. Oh, of course. He wasn't even from Chaldea. "Are you going to help them, right?" Olga asked, her eyes locked on the man beside her. Caster hummed distractedly while manipulating his staff. "Are you not?" The heavy silence filled the air. Mash, gripping her shield, looked at her master, questioning everything, while a spark of emotion pulsed within her. Admiration. Strong and agile, he had displayed astonishing skills in an instant, experiences she had yet to live. A pang of discouragement washed over her. "Watch out for the enemy, Mash," Izuku warned, casting her an intense glance. She tensed, surprised that he was watching her. The steel-eyed opponent scrutinized them coldly. The swords rose, ready to strike. "Aren't you supposed to be an archer?" the green-haired one murmured, disdainfully. "MPH. What can I say? I'm multifunctional," replied the servant. Does that include eliminating humanity? Frustration was palpable in Izuku's voice. You don't understand what is being protected here. The archer responded, his tone laced with contempt. Maybe if you stop trying to kill us. The tension between the two combatants was like a thread about to snap. It's obvious you wouldn't understand. Not with that pathetic mindset. The man challenged. Izuku raised an eyebrow, indignant. I don't know what thoughts are running through your head. But confusing me will not be an option. He prepared to charge at the servant. It was then that a flash glimmered next to the man. A metallic sound resonated as Mash intervened. A sword. But where did it come from? The green-haired one, now more alert, saw a flashing blue gleam. An identical sword appeared out of nowhere and was launched like a projectile. The danger sensor activated. Does he create swords in the air? Can he do more? No, from the beginning he's only created swords. The ground creaked beneath Izuku's feet as Archer moved away. If he can throw swords at that speed, why does he need his bow? Maybe the speed of his launches is slower than his bow. Yes, definitely. Mass X acceleration. Swords flew at great speed toward Mash's shield. No. We can't move. The servant grunted. Izuku shook his head. You keep covering. Mash obeyed, but was surprised to feel her legs being pulled apart. In an instant, Izuku lifted her over his shoulders. Senpai. The girl shouted. Hold on tight. The green-haired one charged toward the archer. He frowned at their approach, and without hesitation, a whirlwind of blue light enveloped his hand. The tension became palpable, and imminent danger flooded the atmosphere. A sharp pain made Izuku grit his teeth. My core twists in madness. Mash. Hold your shield tight. The green-haired one shouted. The girl nodded, anxious at the warning of danger. Archer drew his bow, a spiral of energy surrounded him. A distorted sword transformed into a lethal arrow. This ends now. Thought the servant, watching the crack in that broken phantasm. Time seemed to slow as his steel eyes focused on the shield, mere centimeters away from him. Wait. Centimeters. People react in two ways to imminent danger. Flee or become paralyzed. A resignation. However, there are those who, in desperation, find a quick thought. Survival instinct. Keep going until it becomes involuntary. He admires our gift so much that he makes them shine. Since they took off the ground, the green-haired one never stopped flexing his legs. Repetitive movements, over and over. And a subtle movement of his right hand, as if he were shifting gears. The air vibrated. The eyes of the counter-guardian widened at the sudden increase in speed, as if inertia had vanished. The shield shattered his position, and if he didn't want to be consumed by the explosion of the broken phantasm, he had to fade away. The second thrust into the air changed his direction, sending him toward the ground. His wrist was caught by a handful of scars. Not this time. Were they? Claws. Archer grunted, surprised to feel the claws piercing his flesh. With no option, he dissipated into blue particles, returning to his intangible form. Mash and Izuku crashed to the ground, but thanks to the shield, the fall was cushioned. Ugh. Mash groaned as she rolled, while the green-haired one hugged her protectively. Uff. Ah. Are you alright? He asked anxiously. Mash blinked, looking at him. That's my line, replied the demi-servant. Izuku smiled apologetically as he helped her up. They both looked around, only to find the counter-guardian in front of them, with an expression of annoyance. Castor watched seriously, restless. The Celtic blood in his veins clamored for a good battle. But damn it, the spectacle was captivating. And above all, his speed in the air suddenly increased. Olga expressed, bewildered. The distance between the corrupted servant and the team of idiots, Olga would call them that, had reduced in an instant. Reinforcement. What kind of reinforcement was that? The ability to kick the air with such force seemed delusional. A person capable of facing a servant. They're crazy. Olga whispered, clenching her fist, fearing for Izuku. She wasn't ready to form a contract with a servant. Losing the only one who seemed capable of doing it filled her with anxiety. Shouldn't you do something? Olga growled at Castor. Normally, he would have responded with a threatening, fake glare, but this time he knew she was right. Both were interrupted when the communication device buzzed. The image of Dr. Ramani appeared. Ramani, what's happening? Olga asked. Don't you see we're in a critical situation? The statistics of MASH. The man shouted, leaving both confused. What? What do you mean? Olga asked. The readings from Mash's body showed an abnormality in her statistics as a demi-servant. Ramani said, visibly unsettled. That's not unusual. Depending on our master and their mana supply, the statistics can vary. Castor said. Yes. But I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been from the beginning. This was a sudden change. Her strength, which was previously at C, received 2 optimizations, going to C. Olga and Castor's words resonated, surprised. Now they understood the doctor better. But not only that, her agility also had the same improvement, going from D to D. Caster looked back at the young ones. He noticed a blue glow emanating from their bodies. "I knew that wasn't mana," Caster remarked. "Two abilities received such a considerable increase. But what the hell is happening?" Olga groaned. "Although it seems that, in turn, one statistic has decreased. The resistance dropped from 8A. Ramani said. "This is the first time I'm doing this," thought Izuku, looking at the demi-servant by his side. "Are you using overdrive on her too? Isn't that risky?" asked Goro. "I've always limited it to using it on myself, but never on another person," thought Izuku as he clenched his fists. "Considering you're facing such a dangerous enemy, acting is the only option left. But stay alert. My metahuman ability has not been as straightforward as before for a long time," Goro commented. Izuku nodded silently. The man didn't represent much danger in physical terms. He was neither that fast nor that strong. He could keep up. The problem was his combat skills. He used feints, and those weapons that appeared out of nowhere made him nervous. Several swords emerged around him, ready to shoot. The green-haired one frowned, but his gaze focused on the marks left by his fingers on the man's skin. "Well then, let's start with my second theory," thought Izuku. "Eh?" Goro asked, confused. Swords flew toward the green-haired one in mash. An annoying attack, but effective to generate pressure. However, this time there was something different. Moving his hand, the green-haired one whispered. "Low march." A blue glow flooded Archer's body, just like the swords. Suddenly, the speed of the sharp blades astonishingly decreased. Mash and Archer watched, bewildered. Archer noticed the bluish glow of his own body. A spell. He wondered, looking at the green-haired one, who was the source. Izuku summoned the two twin swords into his hands, but was surprised to see that his ability to create things had diminished his speed. The boost of Kanshu and Bakuya's magical resistance seems ineffective too. The counter-guardian growled. Caster, from a distance, smiled with a mix of satisfaction and desperation at Archer's struggle. That power was not magecraft. Even with his knowledge of the supernatural world, the strange ability that the young master had imposed on both seemed like a puzzle. "Are you imposing overdrive on 3 people?" Goro exclaimed, surprised. "To be precise, I'm interleaving overdrive on 3 people. Using high march on Mash and myself, while using low march on him," Izuku explained, although doing that was easier said than done. It was his plan since he dug his fingers into the servant. After all, overdrive required contact. The second warned. "Using it that way will reduce the uptime. You might have 3 minutes before your cells run out of oxygen." Without responding, the green-haired one focused on Mash. She understood and launched herself toward the servant, followed by Izuku. Archer was surprised by the servant's new speed. Mash also noticed a sudden change. Her strikes were flooded with renewed power, pushing Archer back. "My body doesn't respond as I wish." The counter-guardian tried to move at his maximum speed, but felt trapped. Though his gaze could follow the demi-servant's movements, his body did not comply. In a quick motion, Mash's shield crashed against his face, sending him into a group of trees. Archer tried to turn in the air, but was surprised to see the green-haired one stalking him. Emerald lightning flashed through the forest like a thunderstorm, swirling in Izuku's fist. Once again, emerald and steel clashed. Yet, in the green-haired one's eyes, there was a reflected sadness. As if he truly didn't want to do this. Archer, on the other hand, showed a bitter, ironic smile. "What a fate, huh? I had to be defeated by an idiot. With hero ideals." He recalled a young Redeed. Well, the possibility of their paths crossing again crossed his mind. The sound of the sound barrier breaking resonated after the movement. And a lightning bolt descended to the ground, followed by a shockwave that created an explosion around him. Trees flew while Mash sheltered herself with her shield, avoiding the wave of debris. Olga was covered by a wall of roots created by Caster, who wore a bitter expression. "Just this once, Archer," thought Caster. The environment displayed unprecedented destruction, a massive crater at its center. Mash's hurried footsteps led her toward the place, worried about the attack. "Senpai." The demi-servant shouted. In the midst of the dust cloud, a young green-haired one silently observed blue motes fading into the air. "I'll never get used to this," Izuku murmured, feeling bad about himself, though there was also another type of pain within him. Mash, finally close to him, looked horrified to see a considerable amount of blood oozing from her master's side. As if it were a farewell gift, the servant had plunged one of his swords into Izuku Midoriya's side. That's it guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.